Hi, I'm Merrill Williams, and I am not packaged, and so therefore you can't really see me. I'm in somewhat of a darker light, so that makes it different. This is what Australia's High Court ruled, and the Australia Court ruled that it rejects tobacco's right to intellectual property, somewhat like something in the dark, something not really seen. And if you don't see it, there is no evil. In other words, if you actually turn the light on the problem, or the pack, so to speak, and you identify it, you say what it is, you have, in fact, created a marketing ploy. And in that sense, in the capital of Australia, the highest court endorses a tough new ban. A tough new ban. The toughest laws in the world are in Australia, according to Australia's press release. And so, BAT and Imperial and Philip Morris and all these people are all excited, and they're terribly upset by the idea that they have to go underground and be dark, and they have to be green. Well, let me think. According to pack art, this is what it's about. Pack art is, for you people who don't know what pack art is the art of what is to be seen before you purchase it. And so if you wanted a number 2 pencil, that might be in yellow. If you wanted a Marlboro, that might be in red. And of course, the whole idea is to control tobacco, just about how they do it in the United States. They sell a lot of it, but they also control some of it. I don't believe in the statistics, so this is an interesting approach. Put everything in one color and make it look all the same. Now, of course, there's going to be a little bit of a difficulty there, because in a sense, what Australia is saying is that everything has to be like Kermit the Frog, or the green color, which is olive green, or maybe they're going to look at some other form of green. Well, what is olive green? What is it going to look like? Well, just to summarize, the court found that the companies now have to remove all branding, so you can't see it, and therefore it isn't there. And so they can't sell tobacco products like cigarettes in packets other than as designated by the High Court, which is green. Well, green's interesting, but how did they decide on green? Now, was this by a compromise? You can't really fool the tobacco companies. You can just ban them. So if you're going to ban them, why don't you ban them? And rather than having to fool around with them, fighting big tobacco by going green. Well, what does green mean? Well, there's a lot of talk about the planet green. There's a lot of talk about green cleaning, green this, green that. And then if you look at it, that's the choice here. The law says that according to pack art, from now on, you're going to have to be mysteriously colored in green. Well, I don't know. The thing that I see in tobacco control is always a little bit shady, a little bit darkened by the fact that, You just won't answer the question. The question is, should tobacco be allowed? And should you be selling it? Should you be killing people? It's not a question. You're in the shadows always, no matter what you do. And the tobacco companies somehow find a way. They find a way to deal with it. And they do. And from the point of view of removing all branding, what are you going to do? Walk into a drugstore in Australia and miss the color red? And you're going to say, I want some green Virginia Slims or whatever they sell from Bat's little company or Imperialist company. They're all British anyway. They're all somehow related to the Queen and her cadre of enforcement officers. And Australia is still part of the so-called Commonwealth, I guess. So they're going to have. Who chose green, though? I mean, come on. What's the point? Is that a little bit different for anybody? Back in 1971, everyone thought, well, since the tobacco companies now have to take all of their advertising off of TV over here, and we beat them. And that was because there was a Yul Brynner ad in which said, I'm dying, stop smoking. And the concept there was, we'll consent. And they went into a consent agreement, just like the master settlement agreement here, a consent, But here, the idea is how we're going to deal with this. They seem to get around these things. In 1971, when they stopped doing the ads on TV, or supposedly, they turned to little cigars, and they were just putting Viceroy components inside a brown-wrapped cigar. And the only thing they had to change was how they described it to the IRS. That's interesting. But on the other hand, this one in Australia just is another plugging up some kind of identity that can make Simon, or one of those people named Simon or whatever you are, Simon guessing what Simon says. I'm not really sure, but there are some people out there that really believe there's a way of dealing with these loopholes, little loopholes. Like if you don't see it, don't have to worry about it. If it's not red and not Marlboro and not a logo. Listen, they spend a lot of money on this pack art. They have Italians who sit up there and do the Leonardo da Vinci type design things, which end up like a Nike logo. And on the Capri cigarette, for example, the tobacco pack art, that's what it's called, pack art, costs them a lot of money. And so, in the dark, what are you going to say? The toughest laws in the land, the toughest laws in the world, fighting big tobacco. Yes, sir, we are. But we're going to put it in green. Putting it in green. Well, my thoughts on that are, if it's green, maybe it's pretty good psychology, because if you get everything that's green, what is the symbol of green? Now, if you look back on color symbolism, and the idea doesn't stretch it too far, why did they pick green? Was this a compromise, or did somebody get in there and say, this is the way you have to look at it? Now, if I'm selling you something and you can't see it, what does it mean? How did they wrap the heroin in Pulp Fiction in little baggies in a twist bag, a little twisting thing? And it didn't matter a bit. I mean, Travolta took it anyway, It didn't matter to him what it looked like. So, as you would normally accept the world not to change a lot, tobacco will adjust. Green, by the way, if you want to know, has a pretty distinct association with some things which we normally have to deal with, on a regular basis one time of year, it's the sign of spring. It's the sign of hope. It's the sign of a new beginning. It's a Dionysian revival. It's a color that we associate with the beginning and the revivalistic ritual of birth and a good crop and greenery and grass. And if you're familiar with The Great Gatsby, there you are. There you are, the sign of hope. The green light at the end of the water. Always hope. Well, in my opinion, there's not too much to this, but as long as you can't see it, obviously it doesn't seem to bother you. And for those of you who might have been around in 1971, the pack art simply reverted to women, and women's sensibilities were converted. And from then, you have the advancing of many, many things, including a lot of lung cancer. And so I don't see this as a real hopeful sign, other than the fact that they chose the color of hope, green, spring. Now, let's shed some light on that after all. Isn't it a little bit tricky to have to deal with something that is sort of kind of unreal and maybe a little bit tricky? I'm Merrill Williams, and this is just another comment on what's happening in the world of tobacco and how we do what we do and why we do it. Basically for money, I guess. That seems to be the case. And maybe the idea of green and that fine hope that exists somewhere in the end will be dabbled with and dealt with by the tobacco industry. Goodness knows they know how to deal with it. So good night, sleep well, and don't wonder, because they're not going to ban you tobacco. You're just going to keep on going. And so I appreciate everything you're doing, as everyone else does. Tobacco advocates, keep on going. You're doing well. Fade out. You can't see evil.